Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Gosho Readings by Elisa. Today we have the next Gosho in Volume 1 of the major writings of Nichiren Daishonin. Following the persecutions at Tatsunokuchi, this one is called Lessening One's Karmic Retribution. These videos are actually made for people who wish to either listen or for some reason find it challenging to read themselves. For those who can see the screen, you'll notice a sunflower, which has been put up today, March 2nd, 2022, in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, sending all of them our prayers and for the world to not have war, which is our mission, among others, in the SGI. Again, thank you for listening. Lessening One's Karmic Retribution was written in 1271, and I will begin. There were two brothers called Suri and Handoku. Both of them answered to the name Suri Handoku. You three believers are like them. When any one of you comes, I feel as though all three of you were here with me. The Nirvana Sutra teaches the principle of lessening karmic retribution. If one's heavy karma from the past is not expiated within this lifetime, he or she must undergo the sufferings of hell in the future. But if he experiences extreme hardship in this life, the sufferings of hell will vanish instantly. When he dies, he will obtain the blessings of rapture and tranquility, as well as those of the three vehicles and the supreme vehicle. Bodhisattva Fukyo was not abused and vilified, stoned and beaten with staves without reason. He had probably slandered the true law in the past. And just to fill in Suri and Handoku, there's a footnote. They were the sons of a Brahmin family in Shakyamuni's time, said to be so stupid that they were unable to distinguish between each other. Both would come running when one was called. The Daishonin compares their closeness to the staunch unity of the three believers from Shimosa. Back to the discussion of Bodhisattva Fukyo, Nichiren continues. He had probably slandered the true law in the past. The phrase, quote, after expiating his sins, quote, indicates that because Bodhisattva Fukyo met persecution, he could eradicate his sins from previous lifetimes. The 24 successors were all emissaries from the Buddha who had predicted their advent. And the footnote says, the number and ordering of the Buddha's successors differs slightly according to different documents. The translation here is based on the Daishonin's full list of them, which is printed in the Gosho Zenshu, which is a collection of all the Gosho that they have in Japanese. Nichiren Daishonin continues. Of these, the 15th, Bodhisattva Kanadeva, was killed by a Brahmin, and the 24th, Aryasinha, was beheaded by King Dhanmira. Buddhamitra and Bodhisattva Nagarjuna also suffered many persecutions. Yet others propagated Buddhism under the protection of devout kings without encountering persecution. This would seem to show that there are both good and evil countries in the world. And accordingly, there are two ways of propagation, shoju and shakubuku. Persecutions occurred even in the former and middle days of the law, even in India, the center of Buddhism. Now is the beginning of the latter day and this country is far away from India. I therefore expected that persecutions would arise, and I have long been awaiting them. I expounded this principle a long time ago, so it should not be new to you. Kangyo Soko is one of the 6 stages of practice in the perfect teaching. It means that one does as he speaks and speaks as he does. Those at the stages of Ri-soku and Myoji-soku believe in the perfect teaching, but even though they praise it, their actions fail to reflect their words. That sounds familiar. Something we all struggle with, I imagine. Back to Nichiren's writing. For example, many people study the books of the 3 great rulers and the 5 emperors, but there is not one case in 10 million where society is governed as those ancient Chinese sages taught. Thus, it is very difficult to establish peace in society. One may be letter perfect in reciting the Lotus Sutra, but it is far more difficult to practice as it teaches. The Hiyu chapter states, quote, "They will despise, hate, envy, and bear grudges against those who read, recite, transcribe, and embrace this sutra," unquote. The Hoshi chapter reads, quote, "Since hatred and jealousy abound, even during the lifetime of the Buddha, how much worse will it be in the world after his passing?" Unquote. The Kanji chapter reads, quote, "They will attack us with swords and staves. We will be banished again and again," unquote. The Anrakugyo chapter states, quote, "The people will be full of hostility and it will be extremely difficult to believe," unquote. This all sounds very familiar. Today we have such a world, right? Back to Nichiren. These quotations are from the sutra, but there is no way of knowing when these prophecies will be fulfilled. In the past, Bodhisattva Fukyo and priest Kakutoku read and lived these passages. But aside from the former and middle days of the law, now in the latter day, in all Japan, only Nichiren seems to have done so. From my present situation, I can well imagine how followers, relatives, disciples, and believers must have grieved when so many of their saints met persecution in the ancient days of evil kings. Nichiren has now read the entirety of the Lotus Sutra. Even a single phrase or passage will assure one's enlightenment. Since I have read the entire sutra, my benefits will be far greater. Though I may sound presumptuous, my most fervent wish is to enable the whole nation to attain enlightenment. However, in an age when none will heed me, it is beyond my power. I will close now to keep this brief. Nichiren, the 5th day of the 10th month, in the 8th year of Boon A, 1271. And there is a footnote earlier where it says the books of the 3 great rulers and the 5 emperors were writings popularly ascribed to 8 legendary emperors of ancient China. Confucius is traditionally thought to have incorporated them into his work, the Book of Documents, one of his 5 classics. Little is known about the contents of these works, but the legendary emperors are said to have realized a model government. Here's the background to this Gosho, which is in volume 1 of the major writings of Nichiren Daishonin. The doctrine of karma is central to Buddhist philosophy. It states that each living being carries an accumulation of effects from causes made, not only in this lifetime, but throughout the infinite past. Every word, thought, or action is imprinted upon the individual's life and contributes to his overall destiny, like an invisible balance sheet of debits and credits. The practice of Buddhism is powerful enough to override this vast accumulation and can minimize its negative effects. Thus, the title of this letter, quote, Lessening One's Karmic Retribution, unquote. On October 5th, 1271, only 3 weeks after he came close to being executed at Tatsunokuchi. Nichiren Daishonin drafted this letter and sent it to 3 of his leading disciples, Ota Simon, Soya Nyudo, and Kimbara Hokkyo. One of them had perhaps visited the Daishonin while he was being detained at Echi. Records indicate that they lived in Shimosa to the northeast of Kamakura, and this letter was an expression of gratitude for the visit and concern for the Daishonin's safety. The Daishonin's near execution and detention at Homa Rakurozaimon's mansion were matters of great concern to his followers. Immediately after the shogunate government failed to decapitate Nichiren Daishonin, it could not decide what to do with him, so it temporarily detained him at the mansion. In the meantime, fanatic adherents of the Nembutsu and other sects set fire to houses in Kamakura and ascribed the arson to the Daishonin's followers so that the government would not release him. Thus, the government finally decided to exile him to Sado Island. It seems that when this letter was drafted, the exile had already been determined. The practitioners of true Buddhism were disheartened. The Daishonin anticipated their distress and poured out a steady stream of encouraging letters. He explained that the incidents were not harassment, but were highly significant because they bore out predictions in the Lotus Sutra and thus substantiated the fact that he was the original Buddha. His sufferings were an important and inevitable part of that revelation. In this letter, he then urges these followers to erase their own karma by reading the Lotus Sutra with their lives. He assures them that the power of the supreme law is so great that it can minimize and even wipe out the effects of negative causes. And just a comment for some people who are not familiar with these earlier translations that started coming out maybe shortly before I started practicing. The first one came out. At that time, we were still connected with the temple. And the temple, I don't know whether members today of the SGI continue to consider Nichiren Daishonin as the original Buddha or not. But just to explain what that means for those who are unfamiliar with the term, this does not mean that he's denying Shakyamuni Buddha. It's one of those Goyakujin Tengo kind of things where there's like the really, really far away past when Shakyamuni attained enlightenment. And then there's Kwan Ganjo, beginningless past, even farther back, where the Buddha from whom Shakyamuni attained enlightenment and all the Buddhas throughout the universe attained enlightenment, that first Buddha existed. And the understanding from those days was that Nichiren Daishonin was the embodiment of that Buddha from Kwan Ganjo. Thus, the original Buddha, while Shakyamuni Buddha had in a past lifetime learned and achieved enlightenment because of that original Buddha. So I hope that clears up some things. I just don't know how people consider it lately, but I don't often see him referred to as the original Buddha in current SGI publications. So it's up for you to talk to someone and figure out what you want to believe. But the Lotus Sutra, as he has taught it and given us the Gohanzen, is what we in the SGI practice today. Sending prayers out to the people in Ukraine and all the members struggling with the effects of war, and may that end soon. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, you can give me a thumbs up and feel free to subscribe and listen to any other videos that I post, which will all be readings from the writings of Nichiren Daishonin. Thank you.